Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Many parents, some whom I've personally known, encounter the issue of life-limiting diagnoses for their unborn children. Joining me to have a conversation about the need for support and resources for such parents is Beverly Jacobson. Beverly is the founder of Verity's Village, a nonprofit ministry serving families who receive a life-limiting diagnosis for their babies. She herself has been in that situation, receiving the diagnosis of trisomy 18 for her daughter, Verity. She's also recently penned a book called From Diagnosis to Delivery, published by Verity's Village Press. Beverly, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here, and I always love sharing about our daughter and about this whole world that I didn't know existed before we went through this experience ourselves.
And I'm very glad to have you on precisely because, firstly, I'm a father of very young children, but I have friends who have received similar diagnoses for their children. And so this is a needed conversation. And to know that there are resources to support the couples who are going through this, children who are going through this. So let's begin with you sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. So Verity, our daughter, is our ninth and our youngest. And so as you can imagine, we're very pro-life. And we're thrilled to be pregnant again. However, halfway through that pregnancy, we got the devastating news via a phone call that there was something, quote unquote, wrong with the baby. And I am very grateful that we personally never faced any pressure to abort our baby. We did encounter a couple of doctors who made it clear that their views were different and they were very, disparaging or negative of our desire to carry to term, but it wasn't a direct push towards abortion, as we found is very common with many of the families that we work with. But it did cast, a shadow over the rest of the pregnancy. We didn't know whether Verity would be born alive. We were planning a burial at the same time, trying to decide, what do we do if she is born alive? What does that look like? So it was a really dark and difficult time. I'm very grateful for our faith and for our wonderful church family and our families. Everybody around us was so supportive. And we were so grateful, to welcome her into the world alive. We just didn't know what the future would hold. We were told that babies with her condition, if they were born alive, would live maybe 5 to 15 days on average. And so that whole first year, we were really just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. When is it going to be our turn to say goodbye? As we had seen online, if many families we'd connected with were losing their children because these are life-limiting diagnoses. They are, there are many complexities to overcome, but we knew that our Verity was not a mistake. These babies are not a mistake. They are created in the image of God, and their lives have purpose and value, no matter how long or how short they may be here on earth.
What you highlight is a plight that undoubtedly many of us know people who are going through this, or some of us might be those people going through this. And looking at your book, it's very clear that your husband and you had to go through particular stages from the reception of the diagnosis. So you went from some level of shock to acceptance, to planning, to the birth of the baby. And then from there, all of your plans had to fall into place about how to care for the child. But even the best laid plans didn't work. Just share with us that journey.
Yes. So I kind of felt like we were just thrown into the ocean and, kind of a good luck. We did feel like we were drowning in many ways, trying to seek out information. We did have a good genetic counselor who walked with us, and she didn't really know personally of babies who had, survived for any length of time, but she was quite positive. But we were processing loads of information. And I will say, I'm a mama bear at heart. And when I heard a doctor say to me that my daughter was retarded and she would live a futile life and be a drain on the family, that was when I was pregnant. And I just, Mama Bear woke up. And in fact, I'll just mention that Verity's Village is now called Mama Bear Care because of that moment, because we recognize that these mama bears, there's an innate instinct to fight for your baby and to offer that fierce love and tender care that they need and deserve. But mama bears don't always know where to go. And I navigated that by the grace of God and, with some random support systems. And I realized that there really wasn't much out there. And so as the Lord brought us through this journey, as we got our feet under us and, I became a medical mama bear, learning how to care for Verity, I realized that this was a niche within the pro-life movement that really needed attention, because more and more I was hearing from mamas that at appointment after appointment, the doctor would push termination. It was just unexpected that at some point, clearly you're going to end the pregnancy, right? Like there was no offer of support for carrying to term. There was no mention of the joy and the blessing that these children can be, and that these mamas deserve to hold their babies, even if they're stillborn.
Mm-hmm.
There's beauty in that. And it's heartbreaking, yes, but it's even more heartbreaking and damaging, we know, if the mama terminates the pregnancy. So my heart just went out to these women that were being told all the negative, none of the positive. They weren't being offered any support for carrying to term, only the option to abort. And so 5 years ago, by the grace of God, it's all His doing. He opened the door for us to become a 501c3, and that's what we've been doing ever since. It's walking with moms from diagnosis to delivery, helping them prepare for those unknowns, and then however long they need or want us to walk with them, whether it's on a medical mama journey or bereavement. Our hearts are just, for that holistic care that ultimately comes down to our hope that we have in Jesus Christ.
So, in your experience looking back, you describe particular phases that you've come to identify. And for parents listening, or for family members and friends of such parents who are listening, just walk us through those phases so that they understand and have a structure to work with. Sure.
I think in the beginning, the like you said, the shock, the utter, nobody expects this. You may have the blood test, you may have, a special ultrasound, but really, when you get that news, it is so shocking. It turns your world upside down. And what we like to encourage people to do, especially in the church circles, and this is true no matter what kind of a difficult circumstance a friend is going through. We go back to the book of Job, and in the beginning, Job's friends came, they sat in the dirt with him, and they just were silent. I think a lot of times we want to fill that hurt with something helpful and encouraging. And of course, it's well-meaning, but a lot of times it ends up sounding trite. It might be, well, at least you can get pregnant, or at least you have other children. And, or everything happens for a reason. And there may be elements of truth to those, but really what the mama, what the family needs is just for us to sit with them and acknowledge this is hard, this hurts, and I'm so sorry. One of the best things that was said to me was from a friend who just honestly said, Beverly, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I want to fix it. I want to make it better, but I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I said, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing either. And I just appreciate that you're acknowledging that this is hard. So that's kind of at the beginning. And then I think, walking in prayerfully, encouragement, gently pointing to truth and to hope. Another wonderful thing that happened to me was one of my dear friends and mentors and a prayer partner. She spoke joy over the pregnancy and my baby. And I'll be honest, at the time when she said, Beverly, I feel a kind of a strange sense of joy. I just sense that the Lord is going to use this. And at the time, I kind of inwardly rebelled a little bit. Like, that's easy for you to say, you're not walking through this. But she was right. She was right that Verity brought so much joy. And now with the Mama Bear Care Ministry, what a blessing. And this dear woman, is actually on our board of directors of our nonprofit ministry. And it goes back to her speaking joy in a time of darkness. I'm so glad that she did.
My guest is Beverly Jacobson, founder of Verity's Village, which is now called Mama Bear Care, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's a beautiful story. Beverly has penned this book called From Diagnosis to Delivery as an aid for parents who receive life-limiting diagnosis for their children in utero. Continuing on the other side, I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, talking with Beverly Jacobson, author of From Diagnosis to Delivery, What to Expect When the Unexpected Happens During Your Pregnancy. Beverly is the founder of Verity's Village, now called Mama Bear Care, and this entire interview and this book is about parents who receive life-limiting diagnoses for their children in the womb. Beverly, you were walking us through particular phases, and you had just stopped off at sharing how there was this woman who spoke joy into this time of darkness, and that aided you, as you were mentioning, and that paved the way for the next phase.
Yes. Yes. So at some point, you kind of move from shock and overwhelm and darkness and depression to kind of what we call the awareness and then the advocacy phase that you have to learn. It's a journey of finding out so much that you don't know. My degree was in English education, nothing medical, but all of a sudden I realized, based on the words that those doctors had spoken to me, that they said that her life would be futile and she would be a drain on the family. And Mama Bear woke up and Mama Bear was going to prove them wrong. And so I began a journey of researching and learning all that I could. And that's what we try to walk with mamas through our book, which we provide at no cost to those who are part of our support community. And we provide the service too with a trained medical nurse who has gone through this journey to prepare the mama for delivery, whatever that's going to look like. So any kind of a life-limiting diagnosis, you're going to have a similar journey emotionally and mentally and spiritually. But the practical walking out of that, of getting ready for the next stage, helping mama advocate for her baby and for herself, that is really transformative, because I know I went from feeling like a victim of my circumstances to actually realizing that the Lord had entrusted this little girl to our family, and it was up to us to fight for her. And we also had the honor of stewarding her story. So whatever that was going to look like, we have walked with mamas who have given birth to children who have already passed away in the womb. We've walked with mamas who have had minutes, maybe hours with their children in the hospital, and then some who have gotten to take them home after the NICU, which is, by God's grace, what we did with Verity. Verity is going to turn 9 years old next month. I'm still in awe that she's still with us, and she is joyful. She has profound needs, to be sure, but I don't know, without the support, without the resources, so many moms would not know how to advocate for, first of all, carrying to term because they're pressured to terminate, but then also advocating for life-saving intervention. And sometimes that sounds scary. We think we don't want to see our babies with tubes and wires, but really some of that is very simple, basic support. And we put that into our birth plan for Verity, and we encourage our mamas to do the same. If baby needs respiratory support, maybe some oxygen, maybe a CPAP, positive airway pressure to keep that airway open, because these little babies often have issues with their airway, maybe a feeding tube. Let's stabilize the baby after birth, and let's assess his or her needs. Let's treat the child according to what the child needs and not a diagnosis or a textbook analysis, because we know every individual is different.
You've shared quite a lot about the mother's part of this journey, but no mother journeys alone, or at least in an ideal sense, within the covenant of marriage. So talk about the role that fathers play in advocacy, in support, in journeying with, because this is a journey the parents undergo together.
For sure. And I am so grateful. My husband is a man of God. He's committed to the Lord first and foremost. He's committed to me and to our family. And that commitment is vital. And men do process things so differently. We know men and women are different. God created us in his image and gave us different roles. And I am grateful for my husband's leadership and his willingness to step into a place also of vulnerability. This was so hard for him. He's a strong man. I saw him weep over the news of his little girl. And I still remember the day he came home from work, and we were talking after dinner, and he shared that he had spent most of his workday researching burial options for our baby. And that is a conversation that no parent should have. But it let me know he was doing his best to take care of those practical matters, and then just being there, learning everything he could about Verity, learning what might be needed after birth. And now he is every bit as qualified and equipped as I am. He's a papa bear. Our daughter needs straight catheters 3 times a day. He learned how to do that so we can empty her bladder to help her not have infections. This man has gone above and beyond to care for his little girl, which ultimately is part of caring for his family. And I will say this journey is so hard on a marriage and on a family. So he and I went through it, with it's hard to communicate when you are exhausted and depressed and stressed. It's hard, to parent your other children as well. So I would encourage friends, the church, I would encourage us when you know someone is walking through this, if you know a parent of a child with special needs, reach out and don't say, let me know how I can help, because a lot of times they're drowning and they don't know how to ask for help. They don't even know what they need. So that's a practical way that we can love families in this situation is, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. What can I pick up for you? Or, hey, I'm making some soup. Can I bring some over to you tomorrow night? Just offering. And don't be afraid to keep offering if they're not sure how to respond at first. But those who stuck with us and walked with us, they didn't have to say everything perfectly or do the most amazing things. It was just the power of their presence in our lives and praying for us. Prayer was so important. I'm grateful that today my marriage is stronger than ever. I'm grateful that our other children have grown and learned from this journey as well, and they have really their own testimonies of God's grace and mercy on them. This was so difficult for all of us, but we wouldn't trade it for anything.
One of the things that came out in your book very clearly, that in this journey that both you and your husband went through, there were a few things that came out of the culture and the medical sphere that it almost appeared that obstacles were being put in your way deliberately. Incompatible with life was a narrative you kept getting shoved with, or the next step, whenever it was mentioned, the next step, it was always abortion.
Yes, I really, when we set up our nonprofit, part of the vision statement is that it's our heart, it's our vision to change the narrative surrounding genetic anomalies from heartache to hope. And I hope that, we can express that hope is not simply, I hope my baby lives, or I hope the diagnosis is wrong. But the hope for us comes from Christ and from knowing that God has a purpose for everything and every life has meaning. So I would like to think that as we raise up mama bears and equip them to fight for their babies and then help them learn to share their stories, that we have so many stories out there now, so many mama bears who have walked through diagnosis to delivery and beyond, and they are shouting to the world that their babies matter and their stories matter, whether they were days on earth or months or passed away in utero. These stories, these babies have changed lives. And little by little, I do hear from people in the medical community who have said, well, all I knew was what I learned in school or from a textbook. And now that I've seen this, I'm going to speak differently about this to my next patient, my next client. That is really why we exist. We really want to share the value of these babies broadly in our culture to help change culture, and then on an individual basis, of course, as we walk individually with each family and their unique particular circumstances.
And I'm really, truly glad for that, because my bride and I lived in California for a year, and we were having, as can be expected for most newlywed couples, just trying to figure out pregnancy. And we received similar unfortunate counsel/advice from medical professionals. So hearing that there are advocacy resources like this is going to be tremendously helpful to parents. Now, as we're rounding off this interview, we've got about 2 minutes left. I want to invite you to speak to the parents who have this particular scenario of children with life-limiting diagnoses, but also to the family members for steps, guidance, and to find out about your work?
Absolutely. Well, I would love for them to find us, mamabearcare.org, M-A-M-A, mamabearcare.org is our homepage. They can send a contact form to us, let us know what's going on. We will connect them with our prenatal support group. We'll connect them with our Mama Bear Care coordinator. She's the one with medical, expertise that I don't have, and she has also walked the journey from diagnosis to delivery and beyond. We have pastoral counselors as well who speak to our families individually or as couples or in group counseling sessions. We have a variety of ways that we can walk with these parents through that journey. But I think one of the biggest helps is helping them know they're not alone. I had never heard of this diagnosis when I got it for Verity. I did not know anyone who had walked through a journey like this. And so finding out that there were other parents who were experiencing the same thing, other parents who were caring for little ones with trisomy 18, that made such a difference. And I think, Satan wants to isolate us. He doesn't want us to have community. So mamabearcare.org is where people can go to find out information, but also to support the work that we're doing. We're serving families all over the United States and in other countries. So we would love to have more Mama Bear partners.
I'm very, very grateful, Beverly. Thank you very much for your time and for the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
My guest has been Beverly Jacobson, founder of Verity's Village, now called Mama Bear Care. It's a nonprofit ministry serving families who receive a life-limiting diagnosis for their babies. Find out about her work in the description of today's episode and get involved. Let's support families this way. I'm Marcus Peter.